The ping of my phone felt louder than it should have, slicing through the quiet of the kitchen like a blade. I was rinsing off the last dinner plate, the scent of garlic and lemon still clinging to the air, when I dried my hands and reached for it. A simple message. One line. Just 7 words. I want a divorce. Julian. At first, I laughed, some hollow, shocked sound that escaped my throat without permission. It didn't make sense. Julian wasn't impulsive. He wasn't cruel. He was the man who once left roses on my car windshield during a snowstorm, who packed my lunch every Monday with post-it notes that said, "You've got this." This had to be a mistake. A misfire. Maybe a joke? I walked slowly into the living room, the hardwood floor beneath me creaking beneath each step like it too was questioning what I'd just read. He was there, on the couch, calm, legs crossed, scrolling through his phone like he hadn't just thrown a grenade into our 20-year marriage. "Julian," I said, voice brittle. "What the hell is this?" He looked up. No guilt. No panic. Just a strange, quiet resolve in his eyes. Like he'd already packed this moment away in some mental box labeled handled. I hated that look instantly. "It's exactly what it says," he replied, setting his phone down on the coffee table like he was finishing up a business email. "I want a divorce." The air left my lungs like I'd been punched. I stared at him, unable to form the words building in my throat. Why? After all this time? Why now? He stood up slowly, stretched a little like he'd been waiting for this moment all day. "Because I can't live this lie anymore. I've changed. We've changed. I've been seeing someone. Her name is MARISSA. She works with me at the firm." My fingers curled into fists at my sides. "You're seeing someone?" "I love her, Cass," he said, as if that somehow made any of this okay. "And I want her here. In this house. I want to move forward." My knees buckled, but I didn't fall. Not physically. But something inside me cracked. I felt it, like a pane of stained glass catching the first fatal blow. "You want her here," I whispered. "And what happens to me? To this life we built?" His eyes didn't even flinch. "You need to move out." The words echoed in my ears, absurd and cruel. Move out? From the house I had picked the tile for, planted tulips in front of, decorated every inch of? The house I turned into a home while raising our 2 daughters, while building my own business from scratch. I felt heat rise to my face, shame and fury battling for dominance. "So you're just replacing me? Tossing me out like old furniture so she can slide in?" Julian sighed, like I was being difficult. "Cass, don't make this harder than it needs to be. We haven't been happy in years. You buried yourself in your work. You barely noticed when I started pulling away." I blinked back tears, refusing to give him the satisfaction. "And rather than talk to me, you found yourself a newer model?" "I found someone who listens," he said coldly. That was it. The moment the storm inside me began to take shape. No thunder yet, just pressure. Coiled and heavy in my chest. "You coward," I said, the words trembling on the edge of something darker. "You couldn't even say it to my face. You had to send a damn text." Julian shrugged like he didn't owe me anything more. I didn't want a scene. Too late. I turned and walked toward the stairs, my legs stiff, my heart screaming behind my ribs. Each step felt like climbing out of wet cement. I made it to our bedroom, my bedroom, for now, and shut the door behind me. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stood there, hand still on the doorknob, waiting for the panic to hit. But it didn't. Instead, something else stirred inside me. A simmer. Not quite rage. Not yet vengeance. Just the undeniable truth that my marriage had ended with a text, and the man I once shared dreams and secrets with now saw me as disposable. But if he thought I would go quietly, he was more foolish than I realized. I walked to the mirror, stared at my reflection. The woman looking back was older than she felt. Yes. Lines around her eyes. Tired shoulders. But there was something else too. A quiet steel. Something waiting. I was Cassandra Lane. A mother. A builder. A survivor. And he had just awakened something he wasn't ready for. The next morning, I woke up to silence. The kind that settles deep in your bones and makes you question if the world outside your windows is still spinning. I made coffee on autopilot, my hands moving through the motions, grind, pour, stir, while my mind replayed Julian's words like a cruel song stuck on loop. Divorce. Marissa. Move out. I didn't cry. Not last night. Not this morning. Maybe my tears were still trying to catch up to the reality that I'd been dismissed, discarded like a footnote in the story of his new life. My fingers trembled slightly as I lifted the coffee to my lips, and I hated that they did. Strength was a performance I had mastered, but this betrayal threatened to crack the veneer. I needed an anchor. I needed someone who remembered me before I was a wife, before I was a mother, before my name became a convenience for other people's comfort. So I called Dina. Within 20 minutes, she was at my door, arms open, face full of rage and concern. She didn't ask for details. She didn't have to. I think she knew before I even said a word. The way I stood in my own house like a guest. The way my voice barely worked when I said, "He wants a divorce." She sat with me in the living room, her hand on mine, and listened as I recounted every brutal syllable Julian had spoken. When I was done, she didn't offer platitudes or promises. She just said, "He doesn't know who he's messing with." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But then the front door opened and laughter came spilling in. Alyssa and Jade, my daughters. My heartbeat lifted for a moment, my girls. Maybe they'd help me make sense of this mess. Maybe they'd be my reason to hold it all together. But as soon as they saw me, their smiles faded. Not with concern. With discomfort. Alyssa glanced at her phone. Jade stared at the floor. "Dad told us," Alyssa said flatly, not even waiting to sit. "About the divorce." "Already?" I said, the hurt lacing my voice before I could catch it. "He told you already?" "He didn't have to," Jade murmured. "We've known for a while." Those words landed harder than Julian's text. "What do you mean you've known?" Alyssa crossed her arms, defensive. "We've known about Dad and Marissa. It's been going on for almost a year." A year. A year they had known, while I played hostess and wife, while I packed their lunches, while I smiled at family dinners thinking I was holding everyone together. "You knew he was cheating on me, and you said nothing?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Because what would you have done?" Alyssa snapped. "You would have turned it into a war. You always do. It's always about control with you." I blinked, stunned. "Control? You think this is about control?" Jade spoke softly. "Mom, you're always working. Always traveling. You miss birthdays. Recitals. You don't see us unless it's scheduled. Maybe if you had paid more attention." "Don't," I whispered. "Don't you dare blame me for your father's affair." "I'm not," Jade said, tears welling in her eyes. "But maybe you didn't notice how unhappy he was because you weren't here to notice." I took a step back, like her words had shoved me. And maybe they had. Maybe it was true. Maybe I missed the signs. But since when did that justify betrayal? Since when did career ambition make me unworthy of respect? "So what?" I said hoarsely. "You're siding with him?" "We're not picking sides," Alyssa said. "We're picking peace. And we're moving in with Dad and Marissa." I stared at them, heart caving in on itself. "You're moving in with them?" "It's just easier," Jade added. "He has the house. Stability. We don't want to fight." Tears stung my eyes, and this time I let them fall. I didn't sob. I didn't scream. I just let the silence between us grow so thick it choked the air. Dina sat beside me, watching, jaw clenched so tightly I thought she'd break her teeth. "You are my daughters," I finally said. "And you're choosing the woman who helped destroy our family?" "We're choosing what's best for us," Alyssa replied. I nodded slowly, the pain radiating through my chest. "Then go." Jade hesitated. "Mom." "Go," I said, firm now. "If that's where you want to be, then be there." They left quietly, their footsteps vanishing down the hallway I had once walked them through as babies. I waited until the door clicked shut before I collapsed into Dina's arms. I didn't wail. I didn't break plates or throw things. But inside me, something split clean down the center. The betrayal from Julian was a blade. But the betrayal from my daughters, that was the twist. And yet, even as the shards of my world lay around me, I could feel it, deep beneath the devastation, a stirring. They had broken me, but I would not shatter. The days that followed moved like shadows, long, cold, and heavy. I didn't eat much. I didn't sleep much either. I kept the house clean, not because it needed to be, but because movement gave the pain somewhere to go. I folded sheets I wouldn't sleep in again, rearranged shelves whose purpose no longer mattered. And through it all, one thought burned steady beneath the surface, like a pilot light refusing to die. He thinks I'm done. Julian believed he'd won. That I'd pack my bags, fade into the background, and let him rewrite the narrative with Marissa smiling beside him. He had no idea what kind of storm he had ignited. On the third morning after the fallout, I opened the cabinet above the fridge and pulled down the card I never thought I'd use. A black business card, matte finish, no logo. Just a name etched in silver foil. Marcus Bell, ESQ. I met Marcus at a networking event years ago. He was sharp, respected, whispered about in corridors as the guy you call when scorched earth is the goal. We'd exchanged cards, more out of politeness than necessity. At the time, I'd laughed and said, "Hopefully I'll never need you." He'd smirked and said, "People rarely do until they really do." I needed him now. He answered on the second ring. "Marcus Bell." "It's Cassandra Lane," I said. "I need to burn my husband to the ground." There was a pause long enough for me to doubt myself, but then he replied, calm and unbothered. "Let's talk." We met that afternoon in his sleek office on the 31st floor of a steel and glass tower downtown. Everything about him was precise, his posture, his suit, even the way he poured water into a glass before sliding it to me. I sat across from him, arms crossed, and told him everything. No filters. No hesitation. When I finished, he leaned back, tapping a pen against his notepad. "We don't go to war unless we have a strategy. Julian's made it personal." "Fine, but we'll make it legal." I nodded. "I don't want just a divorce. I want everything he thought he could steal from me." His eyes gleamed. "Then we start digging." "You say Marissa suddenly upgraded her lifestyle. Designer bags, new car, trips. And Julian's been pulling out money in cash. Thousands at a time." He scribbled something down. "Then he's funneling assets. Probably preparing to launch something with her new business or off-the-books investments. He's setting up a new life using the wealth you both built." I exhaled slowly. "Can you stop him?" He smirked. "We won't just stop him. We'll expose him." We agreed to meet again in 2 days. Marcus would prepare a plan. I would begin gathering every document, receipt, and record I could access. Back at home, I printed bank statements until the printer ran out of ink. I scoured emails, opened old folders, searched through desk drawers and dusty boxes. I wasn't just looking for evidence, I was reclaiming pieces of my own history. And then I called Dina. She showed up 10 minutes later with her laptop, a bottle of wine, and an expression that said, "Let's go to war." She knew the girls had moved in with Julian and Marissa, but she didn't press. She just sat down next to me and opened her screen. "We're starting with Marissa," she said. "Social media is a window to the soul, and sometimes the skeletons." It was astonishing how careless people were with their digital lives. Marissa had posted champagne flutes in rooftop restaurants, branded shopping bags in her back seat, luxury spa visits, and cryptic captions like "manifesting everything I deserve." Dina scrolled, eyes narrowing. She's got a soft spot for showing off. "But where's the money coming from?" "That's what Marcus will find out," I murmured. "But we need to build the story. Paper trails. Timelines. Anything we can use to destroy the illusion." We worked into the night, connecting dots, compiling screenshots, matching dates with Julian's supposed business trips. With each piece of the puzzle, the ache in my chest dulled slightly, replaced by purpose. By resolve. I wasn't just getting divorced. I was declaring war. I stood from the dining table sometime around midnight, my back aching. I wandered to the living room window and looked out at the quiet street. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, tired, yes, but awake, aware. This wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. This was justice. This was about reclaiming every ounce of dignity he thought he could strip from me. He'd humiliated me in my own home, turned our daughters against me, lied, cheated, stole, and now I was coming for him. Behind me, Dina said softly, "You okay?" I turned and nodded. "No, but I will be. Because before the battle begins, there's always a hush. A pause. The calm before the war." And I was ready. There was a strange clarity that came with betrayal. Like a fog had lifted, and everything was suddenly in sharp focus. The lies, the silences, the late nights Julian had brushed off with just meetings. I saw it all now. But I wasn't wallowing anymore. I was documenting. Marcus had given me a checklist: emails, bank transfers, credit card statements, hotel bills. Anything that showed financial misconduct or supported the timeline of Julian and Marissa's affair. I tackled it methodically, like I was running one of my interior design projects, but this time, the space I was redesigning was my future. I spent hours compiling folders, labeling every file, highlighting every inconsistency. What struck me most wasn't the money, it was the audacity. Julian wasn't even careful. There were withdrawals that matched the dates of Marissa's Instagram getaways. Receipts for luxury gifts shipped to addresses I didn't recognize. Hotel bookings made under a corporate alias he'd used years ago. Sloppy, arrogant, and utterly damning. Marcus was impressed. "You could have been a forensic accountant," he said with a smirk as we laid everything out across his conference table. "This will help prove not just infidelity, but financial misconduct. That's leverage, Cassandra." I nodded, but I wasn't smiling. I wasn't doing this for the win, I was doing it for the truth. For every time I doubted myself, for every moment Julian had made me feel small or invisible. This wasn't just strategy. It was survival. But Julian was not going down quietly. 2 days later, my phone lit up with a tag notification. I clicked the link and felt my stomach twist. There it was. A post from an account I didn't recognize, but the message was unmistakable. Maybe if she hadn't been such an ice queen, he wouldn't have left. #TruthHurts, #FreeJulian. The comments were worse. People I didn't know, and some I did, chimed in with thinly veiled jabs. Words like neglectful, cold, career-obsessed. There were subtler ones too. She was always so intense. She seemed hard to love. The same old misogyny repackaged in hashtags and captions. I stared at the screen, hands trembling. This wasn't just gossip. This was a coordinated attempt to smear me. Julian wasn't content with leaving. He wanted to destroy the version of me that had any credibility, any dignity. He wanted to rewrite the story, casting himself as the victim and me as the villain. I tossed my phone onto the couch and paced the room, heat rising in my chest. That old wound, the one that said "you're too much, you're too strong, tone it down," flared again. But before it could sink its claws in, I called Dina. She answered on the first ring. "I saw it. I'm going to kill him." "No, you're not," she said calmly. "You're going to sit down. You're going to let me handle this. And then, you're going to win." I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't have to. Dina had been my best friend since we were 11 years old. When people underestimated me, they got surprised. But when they underestimated her, they got obliterated. Within an hour, she had tracked the original poster's IP address to an apartment registered under Julian's name. She drafted a response, a surgical rebuttal posted to my official business account, refuting the lies with grace and dignity, paired with a polite cease and desist warning that sent the internet buzzing. Then, she leaked Marissa's luxury spending spree timeline anonymously to a gossip blog known for devouring cheaters. The post went viral. Comments turned quickly. Sympathy tilted. Screenshots were shared. The tide began to shift. I watched it unfold like someone watching a storm from inside a fortress. Julian had underestimated me again. He thought I'd play this the way I played our marriage, polite, contained, careful. But I wasn't that woman anymore. He burned the bridge. Now I walked on the embers. Marcus called me the next day. "You're doing better damage control than some PR firms." "I hope you know that." "I'm not controlling damage," I replied. "I'm telling the truth." He chuckled. "Well, the court will love that. Especially since I found something interesting." I leaned forward. "What?" "Julian registered a new LLC last month, Raven Point Development. Guess whose name is listed as CFO?" I didn't even have to say it. "Marissa Geller," he confirmed. "He's already started shifting assets through it. He's making her his partner in more ways than one. But now we can prove he's hiding marital funds to support it." My jaw clenched. "Let's bring it all." "And we will," Marcus said. "But brace yourself. We'll file officially next week. That's when the real war begins." I sat in silence after the call, staring out the window. My neighborhood looked the same, sunlight cutting through the trees, sprinklers running, a dog barking in the distance. But everything had changed. I had changed. I wasn't cleaning up anymore. I was loading ammunition. Julian lit the match. But I was building the arsenal. I hadn't set foot inside Highland Ridge Estates since the night everything shattered. Driving through its pristine gates again felt surreal. The perfectly manicured lawns, the marble fountains, the polished symmetry of the houses, they all mocked me with their unbothered perfection. But I wasn't here for nostalgia. I was here for war. The divorce papers were in my bag, neatly stacked, freshly printed, and ready to be served. Marcus had filed them that morning. I insisted on delivering the copies myself. No process server. No courier. This was personal, and Julian would feel that. He'd see my face, and he'd know this wasn't the woman he cast aside. This was the woman who came back standing taller. I parked in front of the house that used to be mine. I built this home with him. Chose every tile in that kitchen. Fought with the contractor about the color of the shutters. Brought our daughters home to it after school award ceremonies and sleepovers. And now I stood in front of it with nothing left to lose. I knocked. The door opened faster than I expected. Julian stood there, barefoot, holding a coffee mug like he'd just rolled out of bed. He wore the same old t-shirt he used to wear on Sundays, my least favorite one. His hair was tousled, his eyes a little puffy. For a second, he looked like the man I married. But then he smiled, that smug, practiced smile. The one I used to mistake for charm. "Cass," he said casually, like this was some friendly drop-by. "Didn't expect you." "I bet," I replied, stepping in before he could invite me. "We're not going to stand on the porch for this." He moved back slightly, and I walked in like I still belonged there, because a part of me always would. The scent of lavender cleaner hit me immediately. Marissa's choice. Everything was rearranged. The living room had new pillows, the artwork I'd selected was gone, and the bookshelves now held glass sculptures instead of novels. It was still our house, technically, but it had been scrubbed of me. "Care to tell me what this is about?" Julian asked, setting his mug down on the table. I pulled the envelope from my bag and placed it gently on the coffee table between us. "You've officially been served." He blinked. "You couldn't have just let the lawyer do it?" "I wanted to see your face," I said. "I wanted to make sure you knew this wasn't going to be easy." His smirk faltered. "You're making this harder than it has to be." "No," I said quietly, "you made this harder the moment you lied. The moment you turned our daughters against me. The moment you gave another woman my life and didn't even have the courage to apologize for it." He shrugged. "You were never really present anyway, Cass. Always working. Always chasing success. I needed something more than a business partner." I stepped closer, meeting his eyes. "And what you found was a parasite." Don't talk about Marissa like that, he snapped, his voice rising for the first time. I pulled out the documents Marcus had prepared, copies of hotel invoices, travel bookings, wire transfers, and the LLC registration for Raven Point Development. I laid them on the table, one by one. What is this? He asked, brows furrowing. This is evidence, I said, my voice razor sharp. Proof that you've been funneling marital assets into a business you plan to launch with your mistress. Proof of financial misconduct. Which, in case you've forgotten, matters a lot in a court of law. He stared at the papers, jaw clenched. You've been spying on me? I've been protecting myself, I said. Because unlike you, I don't confuse betrayal with freedom. Footsteps thundered down the stairs. I turned and saw them, Alyssa and Jade, frozen halfway down the steps. They hadn't seen me yet. Mom? Jade's voice cracked a little. Alyssa's eyes shifted to the papers on the table. What's going on? Julian started toward them. Nothing. Go back upstairs. No, I said. They deserve to know the truth. Alyssa hesitated. What truth? Ask your father, I said, watching Julian squirm. Ask him what Raven Point is. Ask him why Marissa's name is on bank records that belong to this family. Julian's mouth opened, but no words came. Jade descended the rest of the stairs slowly, her eyes moving from me to the documents. Alyssa stayed rooted at the top, but her expression had changed. No longer cold. Just confused. Guarded. I trusted you, Jade said softly to Julian. You told us she was overreacting. I did what I had to, he said, his voice brittle now. You'll understand one day. I already do, Jade murmured. Alyssa was silent. That silence meant something had cracked. I didn't say another word. I didn't have to. I turned, walked to the door, and let myself out. The sun hit my face as I stepped outside, warm and clean. I hadn't won yet, but I'd made my move. And for the first time since this all began, I could feel the scales beginning to shift. He thought the house would protect him. But I had brought the truth to his front door and left it wide open. The courthouse smelled like dust and old ink. Gravemont County Family Court wasn't built to be impressive. Its gray walls and flickering fluorescence carried none of the gravitas you'd expect for a place where lives were redrawn. Still, as I walked through the doors, Marcus by my side, I felt like I was entering a battlefield. Everything had led to this. Every sleepless night, every spreadsheet, every confrontation. Today wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about clarity, truth, restoration. Julian was already seated when we entered the courtroom. He wore a navy suit, crisp but slightly too tight at the collar, like it had been tailored for a man who hadn't yet lost control of his narrative. Marissa wasn't with him. That told me everything. The shine of their affair had dulled. The cracks were showing. I took my seat beside Marcus. Across the aisle, Julian looked at me briefly, then glanced away. For the first time since all of this began, he looked nervous. That made two of us, but only one of us was prepared. Ready? Marcus asked, sliding open the thick file in front of him. I nodded, exhaling slowly. Let's finish this. Judge Denise Calloway entered moments later, commanding the room with a presence that made everyone sit a little straighter. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. She was the kind of woman who didn't waste words, and I respected that immediately. We're here today for the matter of Lane versus Lane, the clerk announced. Dissolution of marriage, division of assets, and financial disclosures. The proceedings began. Julian's lawyer, a man named Philip Greaves with slicked-back hair and a perpetual smirk, tried to set the tone early. He painted Julian as a devoted husband abandoned by an emotionally distant wife. A woman too busy for her family. A woman obsessed with her work. It was a narrative I had expected. But it didn't sting the way I thought it would. It just sounded lazy. When Marcus stood, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. He simply spoke the truth, one fact at a time. Your Honor, he said, what we have here is a case of deception. Mr. Lane did not merely fall out of love. He orchestrated a calculated extraction of marital assets to fund a romantic and financial partnership with another woman, all while his wife, Mrs. Lane, continued to uphold both household and business responsibilities. He passed the judge a neatly tabbed binder. Inside, you'll find documentation of over $350,000 in undisclosed withdrawals, wire transfers to private accounts, and an LLC registered under Mr. Lane's name, Raven Point Development, with his mistress listed as Chief Financial Officer. Julian shifted in his seat. Marcus continued, flipping to a new section. There's more. Hotel receipts spanning 18 months, booked under business aliases. Travel itineraries that align with Ms. Marissa Geller's social media posts. A paper trail too deliberate to be dismissed as coincidence. I watched as Judge Calloway's brow furrowed while she scanned the binder. Then her gaze lifted, sharp and unreadable. Mr. Lane, she said coolly, do you contest any of these claims? Philip stood. Your Honor, we believe these documents may have been obtained under questionable privacy circumstances. Calloway cut him off. Are you denying the content? Philip hesitated. No, Your Honor. That pause was everything. For the next 40 minutes, Marcus dismantled Julian's facade piece by piece. Each receipt, each signature, each timestamp laid bare his betrayal, not just as a husband, but as a man who thought he could rewrite facts with enough arrogance and charm. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly. My heart was pounding, but my voice didn't shake. I didn't come here today to beg for sympathy, I said. I came for accountability. I gave 20 years to a marriage I believed in. I built a home, raised 2 daughters, and built a business from the ground up, all while trusting that my husband was doing the same. Instead, he was building something new behind my back. Not just a relationship, but a life. A future he never intended to include me in. I met Julian's eyes then. He didn't just betray me. He took from me time, money, dignity. But I'm not here to be broken. I'm here to claim what's mine. I sat down to silence. Not courtroom silence, real silence. The kind that lives in held breath and furrowed brows. Judge Calloway flipped through the binder one more time before closing it with a soft thump that felt louder than it was. Her ruling came swift. Given the compelling evidence of financial misconduct and deliberate concealment of assets, the court awards Mrs. Lane the majority of marital holdings, including the Highland Ridge property, shared investments, and liquid assets. Mr. Lane will pay restitution for the misappropriated funds. Custody of the minor assets related to shared business ventures will be dissolved. Divorce granted. Julian didn't move. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just breathed. Because that sound, the gavel coming down, it wasn't a victory cry. It was release. I walked out of that courtroom not as the woman he tried to bury, but as the one who had learned how to unearth herself. The sun outside the courthouse felt different than it had just an hour earlier. Warmer. Calmer. As if the air itself had shifted to make space for the woman I was now. I walked down the steps with my head high and no weight on my shoulders, not because the burden was gone, but because I had finally decided to stop carrying what wasn't mine. Julian trailed behind with Philip, the two of them locked in quiet, heated conversation. He didn't even look in my direction, but I didn't need him to. I'd seen enough in that courtroom to last a lifetime. The twitch of his jaw when the gavel hit, the way he refused to meet my eyes. The way his grip tightened on the edge of the table when Judge Calloway read the words, "Majority assets granted to Mrs. Lane." Justice didn't always come in grand moments or loud declarations. Sometimes it came in quiet finalities, in the simple, irrevocable sound of a man finally realizing he had lost. I stepped aside to let them pass on the sidewalk, and that's when I saw her, Marissa. She was standing by Julian's car, dressed like she'd stepped out of a boutique magazine ad, but her face gave everything away. She looked anxious. Her arms were crossed tightly, and her eyes were scanning the doors as if expecting someone else to walk out. Maybe the version of Julian who still had money, power, a future worth attaching herself to, When she finally spotted him, she took a tentative step forward. "Julian," she said, her voice thin, barely audible over the street noise. He didn't answer at first, just kept walking. She rushed to his side and placed a hand on his arm. "Can we talk?" He stopped, but his body didn't turn toward her. "What is there to talk about?" Marissa blinked. "You said once the divorce was final, we'd start fresh. That we'd launch Raven Point together. That—" "I don't have Raven Point anymore," he said, his voice flat, his face unreadable. "The court froze the accounts. The judge ruled against me. But we had plans," she said, her voice trembling. "I turned down 3 job offers. I left my apartment. I thought we were building something." He finally looked at her then. Not with love. Not even with pity. Just exhaustion. "It's over, Marissa. I've lost everything. The firm let me go this morning. My savings are gone. My reputation's ruined." I stood there, watching from a safe distance. Not hidden, just silent. Observing. Not out of pettiness, but because this was a moment I needed to witness, not for vengeance, but for closure. Marissa took a shaky step back. "You're saying, we're done?" Julian didn't respond. That was his answer. She stood there a moment longer, as if trying to summon some shred of dignity to cling to. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. No tears. No drama. Just gone. And with her went the last remnant of the fantasy he had tried to build on the ashes of our life. I watched Julian for a moment longer. Alone now. No lawyer. No lover. Just a man with his hands in his pockets and a blank stare on his face. Then I turned and walked away. Dina was waiting by her car, leaning against the passenger door with 2 cups of coffee in hand and an expression that said I saw it all. "You good?" she asked, handing me a cup. I took it. Better than good. We got into the car and pulled away from the courthouse, the building growing smaller in the rearview mirror. Dina glanced over at me as we reached the first stoplight. "You're not crying," she noted. "I did all my crying months ago," I replied. This part is just breathing." She smiled. "You didn't just survive him. You beat him." I nodded, more to myself than her. Not just him. The version of me that thought I needed to hold it all together. The woman who stayed quiet. Who shrank. That woman was gone now. That night, I sat alone in my new apartment, a cozy 2-bedroom with exposed brick and large windows that overlooked the city's skyline. I curled up on the couch with a blanket, a glass of red wine in hand, and for the first time in months, silence felt like peace, not punishment. I picked up my phone and saw a message from Jade. Just 3 words. "Are you okay?" I stared at it for a long time, then typed back. "I am. Are you?" No reply yet. But that was okay. The cracks were forming. And cracks, I'd learned, were how the light got in. I sipped my wine and leaned back. The war was over. And I had won not just the case, but myself. 1 year. That's how long it had been since the courtroom, since the gavel came down and the name Cassandra Lane became mine again, without the weight of his shadow behind it. And in that year, I didn't just survive. I built. Brookmere Heights wasn't far from Gravemont, but it felt like another world. The air here was slower, less judgmental. My apartment had turned into a home, not a mansion, not something that screamed money or power, but something mine. Soft walls, clean lines, and sunlight that spilled across the hardwood like a morning promise. It was quiet. I liked quiet now. Lane and Light Interiors, my firm, had taken off like wildfire. We had 5 full-time designers, a waitlist 6 months out, and just last month, our portfolio was featured in a national design magazine. People kept asking what changed, what inspired the shift, and all I could say was, I got clear on who I was designing for. But success wasn't what brought the butterflies to my stomach that morning. It was the text I'd sent 3 days ago. And the one I received late last night in return. Will come by around noon. If that's still okay. Alyssa. I stood in the kitchen, wiping down the already clean counter, sipping peppermint tea and watching the clock like it might change its mind. 12:03. 12:05. Then the knock. My heart paused. I walked to the door and opened it slowly. Alyssa stood there first. Jade beside her. Both older than I remembered, and yet still the girls I raised, the ones whose backpacks I once zipped up, whose scraped knees I'd kissed clean. But they weren't laughing now. No smiles. Just hesitant eyes and fidgeting hands. "Hi, Mom," Jade whispered. "Hi," I breathed. "Is it okay if we come in?" Alyssa asked. I nodded and stepped aside. They walked in like strangers visiting a museum, their eyes scanning the space with quiet reverence. Or guilt. Maybe both. I designed it with soft colors, warm textures, not a single piece of furniture that didn't have a story behind it. This place wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about healing. "Tea?" I asked. They both nodded. I poured from the pot I'd made fresh, peppermint, always peppermint, and handed each of them a mug. We sat around the small round dining table I'd found at a flea market and refinished myself. I didn't speak first. I wanted to see if they would. It was Jade who broke the silence. "Julian's business failed," she said softly. Raven Point never got off the ground. Investors pulled out when the financial records didn't line up. Then he got sued. He tried to fight it. Lost everything. I nodded once. "I'm sorry to hear that." Alyssa looked up at me sharply. "Are you?" I didn't say I was sorry for him. I replied gently. I said I was sorry to hear it. It affects you both. I know that. She stared at her mug, then back at me. He can't pay for school anymore. Or rent. Or anything, really. He's not the man we thought he was. "I tried to tell you," I said carefully. "We know," Jade whispered. "We didn't want to believe it. We were angry. Thought you were being vindictive. But we were wrong," Alyssa added. "You were protecting yourself. And us, in a way." I took a breath, setting my tea down. I was angry too. You sided with someone who broke us. That hurt more than the divorce itself. But I know you were caught in something you didn't understand. You were young. Confused. I won't pretend it didn't damage me. But I'm not here to hold it over your heads. Alyssa's eyes brimmed. "We're sorry, Mom. For everything." Jade reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. "We were just scared. He made it seem like you didn't want us. That you'd chosen your career over us. But that wasn't true, was it?" I shook my head slowly. "I never chose anything over you. I just didn't know how to be everything at once. And I shouldn't have had to. No one should." A moment passed. Still. Gentle. Fragile. "Can we stay a while?" Jade asked. "Maybe order food later? Just talk." I smiled, warmth finally breaking through the ache I'd carried for too long. "You can stay as long as you want." And they did. We sat on the floor hours later, flipping through old photo albums. Alyssa laughed at a picture of herself in braces. Jade groaned at her 6th grade dance dress. I watched them with a kind of awe, how even in pain, there could be joy. How love, when watered with grace, bloomed again. That night, as I locked the door behind them and watched them drive away, I leaned against the frame and closed my eyes. Forgiveness didn't come with fireworks or grand gestures. Sometimes it came in quiet afternoons with chipped tea mugs, unspoken apologies, and the slow rebuilding of something once broken. 5 years. That's how long it had been since the message that tore my life in two. 5 years since I stood in the ruins of my marriage and thought, this is where everything ends. I had no idea then that endings are just cleverly disguised beginnings. Now I stood in the glass lobby of Lane and Light Interiors, staring up at the polished brass letters mounted against a backdrop of soft white oak. My heels clicked softly on the marble floor as I stepped forward, my reflection stretching out in the curved glass surrounding the atrium. It was strange to see myself like this, confident, composed, whole. The firm had grown beyond anything I once imagined. We had clients from 3 coasts. Our designs were featured in international editorials. We'd just landed a renovation contract with a major tech CEO's home. And I say we now because I wasn't alone anymore. I had built something solid, something meaningful, and I had done it without compromise. The elevator chimed behind me, and I turned just in time to see Alyssa and Jade step out. Both of them, my daughters, walking toward me in crisp business attire, looking every bit like the accomplished young women they'd become. Jade carried a tablet, still bouncing between design school and assisting our junior creative team. Alyssa was reviewing a client brief she'd drafted. She'd just finished her MBA and taken a full-time role on the operations side of the business. Mom, Jade beamed. They approved the Ridgeway foyer concept. Said it was timeless with edge. Their words, not mine. And I tightened up the proposal for the Cambridge loft remodel, Alyssa added, holding out a printed copy. Final numbers are better than we expected. They'll sign this week. I took it from her hand, nodding slowly. Well done, both of you. It never stopped feeling surreal, this partnership with my own daughters. The same girls who once walked out of my life now walked beside me, not because they had to, but because we'd found our way back. It had taken time. Therapy. Hard talks. Softer ones. But love, when it's real, doesn't dissolve. It waits. As we walked together toward the conference room, the receptionist called out, "Ms. Lane? You have a visitor in the lobby." I paused, turning. "Name?" She frowned slightly. "Julian Lane." The name stopped me, like a cold wind slinking in through a crack in the window. It had been years since I'd seen him in person, heard his voice, and in all that time I never once wished for it. Still, I nodded. "I'll take it in the mirror hall," I said. 5 minutes. The mirror hall was a long, glass-paneled corridor that connected the main lobby to the executive suites. I'd designed it myself, clean, elegant, reflective, like walking through a memory. Julian stood at the far end when I entered, hands in his pockets, wearing a blazer that looked a little worn at the edges. His eyes lifted when he saw me, and I watched his face change, recognition, guilt, awe. Maybe all three. "Cassandra," he said. I kept my expression calm. Neutral. "Julian." He looked around the space, as if he were stepping into a museum built from a past he no longer owned. "I saw the firm in the paper. You made it." "I rebuilt it," I corrected. "From the ground up." "I heard you're one of the top firms on the East Coast now," he said. "That's incredible." I didn't say thank you. "Why are you here?" He hesitated, shifting slightly. "I guess I just wanted to see it." "See you." I studied him. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not in size, but in presence. There was no bravado left. No arrogance. Just a man who had once played the wrong hand and was now living with the consequences. "I live with my parents now," he added quietly. "Haven't had steady work in a while. Marissa's gone. She left 2 years ago. Said she never signed up for rock bottom." I didn't flinch. "I hope you find your way, Julian." "But I stopped looking backward a long time ago." He nodded, the ghost of a smile flickering. "You look happy." "I am," I said simply, and that didn't come from revenge. It came from rediscovering the woman you tried to convince me I wasn't. He said nothing, just stood there, silence heavy in the hallway. Finally, he turned to leave. "I'm proud of you," he said, not looking back. I watched him go until he disappeared around the corner. Then I turned and looked at myself in the mirrored wall. I saw a woman who had lost everything and built something better. I saw scars and strength, softness and steel. I saw Cassandra Lane, not someone's wife, not someone's mistake, but a woman entirely her own. And she was exactly where she was meant to be. The evening lights of the city shimmered like a sea of candles outside the grand windows of the event hall. Inside, the soft clink of glasses and laughter filled the space, rising above the gentle hum of jazz floating from the live quartet in the corner. Tonight was a celebration, 5 years of Lane and Light Interiors, a firm built from ashes and forged in fire. My fire. I stood near the balcony, holding a flute of champagne, watching my team circulate through the crowd with effortless grace. All of them dressed in black and gold, the firm's signature palette, glowing with pride. Our logo glinted subtly on lapel pins and cufflinks. The event was elegant, intentional, just like everything we'd done since the day I took my life back. "Your speech was perfect," Dina said, stepping up beside me. The room was dead quiet. "You had them in your hand." I smiled, exhaling slowly. I wasn't sure I'd get through it. "You didn't just get through it," she said. "You owned it." She looked radiant, as she always did. My business partner, my sister in every way that mattered. She'd stood beside me during the darkest moments, never letting me forget who I was, even when I did. "It feels surreal," I admitted. 5 years ago, I could barely stand. Now I feel untouchable. She raised her glass. "That's because you are." From across the room, I saw Alyssa and Jade speaking to a group of clients, both of them glowing with the ease of women who had finally stepped into their own. They spotted me and waved, and I waved back, heart tightening with something that wasn't pain anymore, but pride. The kind that blooms only after the storm. A few hours later, after most of the guests had left and the band began to pack up, the three of us, me, Alyssa, and Jade, sat on the rooftop terrace, city lights winking in the distance. Jade kicked off her heels and tucked her legs beneath her. "Remember when I said I hated the stuffy business world? That I'd never work in design?" "You did," I said with a small laugh. "Now I'm obsessed with tile samples and paint codes," she grinned. "You win." I looked over at Alyssa. "And you swore you'd never forgive me." She nodded slowly. "And I still think about that day when I walked out and didn't look back. I don't think I'll ever forgive myself fully for it." I reached across and took her hand gently. "You don't have to keep punishing yourself. You came back. You healed. And so did I." She looked up, her eyes wet. "I'm sorry again, Mom. For all of it." Jade leaned into my side. "We were young and angry and scared. But you never gave up on us." I felt my throat tighten, emotions rising fast. "Because I knew one day you'd find your way back. And I wanted to be here when you did." A soft silence settled over us. The good kind. The kind that didn't beg to be filled. Jade nudged me with her shoulder. "You know you're kind of a legend now, right?" I raised an eyebrow. "I am." "Yeah," Alyssa said, grinning. "The designer who got burned rebuilt everything and now sits at the top of the game. Everyone talks about you. Even the magazines called you the Phoenix of Brookmere," Jade added with a smirk. "Which is kind of dramatic, but also accurate." I laughed, genuinely this time, letting it pour from me like a long-held breath. "A phoenix, huh?" "You rose from fire, Mom," Alyssa said softly. "And you didn't just survive, you soared." I didn't answer. I couldn't, not with how full my chest felt. I looked out at the skyline, the glitter of a city that once overwhelmed me now lighting my path forward. Everything I had lost, my marriage, my home, my family's trust, I had found again. Or rebuilt. Or reimagined. And none of it would have been possible if it hadn't all come crashing down first. Pain had carved me hollow, but it also made room for something new. Something better. I stood slowly and looked at my daughters. "Let's go home." We gathered our things and walked toward the elevator, arm in arm, the hum of the city cradling us. As the doors opened, I turned for one last look at the rooftop, the skyline, the life I had fought like hell to reclaim. I wasn't bitter anymore. I wasn't broken. I was reborn. I was Cassandra Lane. And I was unstoppable.